All right, good morning, everyone. I'm gonna get ready to get started. My name is Martin DeAndrea. I'm the compliance manager with Maximum One. I will be I'll be your speaker for today. Pitch hitting for Alan this morning. We'll be covering overcoming obstacles to close, strategies to overcome common barriers, and close more transactions successfully. So we're gonna go ahead and jump in and get started. So let's talk about why deals fall apart. So deals fall apart for a variety of issues, of course. One of the main sticky points being financing issues. Whether DTI issues, whether a buyer went out and bought a new couch and financed it, or went out and bought a new car. A lot of different situations can arise with financing issues. I had a client actually who was literally writing a contract and they got laid off the next day. So there's a lot of different reasons why on the financing side deals can fall apart. It can also be related to inspection concerns. A lot of buyers, a lot of them are first-time home buyers, are not familiar with the buying process. They're not familiar with the fact that you have to do a home inspection and what's entailed in a home inspection as well. So a lot of the stuff in home inspections can scare first-time home buyers. So it's our job to really be that expert and prepare them for that, to give them that overview of what to expect. So for example, I've seen clients get, really concerned about a GFCI plug. Because the home needed, one in every bathroom and, two or three in the kitchen. And, to someone who's not familiar with that, hiring an electrician, but it's, not saying you don't need to hire a licensed professional to do electrical work, but it's very minor work. And even if you did hire an electrician to do that work, it would be very minimal to do those installs. Low appraisals, another reason why deals fall apart. Appraisals come in low. Negotiations kind of fall apart. The seller doesn't want to reduce the price, of course, and the deal can fall apart due to price market value. But we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Poor communication. I'll say it. I think Alan has said it many times. A lot of agents don't answer their phones. So guys, we gotta answer our phones. Let's make sure we're picking up the calls, we're texting people back, we're monitoring our emails every day, but not just monitoring and checking what we're receiving, but also making sure that you're the main communicator and sort of driving what you need from everybody else in that transaction, whether it's from the lender or the listing agent, or if you're on the, if you are the listing agent from the buyer agent, could be from the attorney, whatever it is, whether it's title related. Make sure that you're communicating with everyone on a consistent basis. For me, I like to check in at least once a week, typically with my client. With the lender, it may be once a week, depending what stage in the process we're actually in. So it just depends, but consistent communication is key. Buyer hesitation. A lot of time, buyers, they sign a contract, they go into due diligence. They're okay with the inspection report, but sometimes, they go home, they go to sleep, and they wake up and change their mind. So it definitely happens, especially with a lot of first-time home buyers, something to definitely keep abreast of, but also prepare, first-time home buyers before you bring them out. I think that, tied to our presentation and making sure that there isn't hesitation before they're ready to, pull the trigger and go out and start looking at homes and purchase one. Contract contingencies, another reason why deals fall apart. Variety of contingencies, whether it was a special stipulation, whether it was due diligence, whether it was the finance contingency. Deals fall apart for a variety of reasons connected to those contingencies. But typically, you are able to work it out if you're a great negotiator. But you can also connect with your broker and see what tactics you can work on to save that deal as well. And that's just kind of a general consensus on why deals fall apart. Let's jump into sort of the finance obstacles that we run into. Buyer loan denial, right? That happens a lot, of course, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean that they can't be approved down the road. Maybe it's a month or 2 months. Maybe they have to pay off some debt to income issues. Maybe they have to pay off some credit cards. Can also be some credit challenges as well. But to be honest with you, I personally don't take out buyers to see homes unless they're pre-approved. There's very rare instances where I do take out buyers that aren't pre-approved, but more than likely, I'm going to make sure that they're pre-approved before we go out so that I know that there is no challenges with their credit. There's no, initial challenges with their buyer loan potentially being denied. And then also employment verification issues. Some people work off the books. Some people work on the books but get paid differently. So it just depends. I've had one where we had to delay closing because the HR department just would not get back to the lender for 2 weeks to verify employment. So it just depends. There's a lot of different obstacles that you can come into on the finance side. Some solutions, as I mentioned prior, pre-approval letter. One of the top most, important things you want to get before you really truly start working with a buyer. You can definitely start working with buyers well in advance before that. They don't even have to have a pre-approval. They could actually be renters, right? There's a lot of agents who have a strategy of, working with renters and helping them become first-time home buyers, which is a great strategy. But make sure before you take out your clients, of course, you're the CEO of your own business, but as a best practice, make sure they have that pre-approval letter so that if they do see something they like, they can go ahead and move forward with making that offer. Lender communication, just making sure, before I work with a lender, of course, I do have a relationship with lenders, but before I work with a lender, I make sure that not just vetting the lender, but I have a conversation with them thoroughly about the client, just so that I can fully understand if there's any potential challenges or issues that may pop up down the road or product. Does someone have a question? I'm sorry. Can you mute yourself, please? Thank you so much. So yeah, just making sure that you're connecting with that lender, make sure that the communication is thorough. You understand what product that your client's applying to or the products that are available that they're offering the client and what stipulations connect to those products. Also making sure that, that the client has submitted all of the documentation necessary. Even if they have a pre-approval, there's still more documentation typically that usually a buyer will have to submit to make sure that they get a conditional approval. Backup financing options. When you're meeting with your clients, you want to make sure that you're having thorough conversations. If they're a first-time home buyer, that's amazing. They can definitely apply for a FHA loan, which is 3.5% down. Maybe it's a USDA, maybe it's Georgia Dream, whatever it is, but making sure that there's other conversations happening throughout that process. So I always, if my client says, I'm doing FHA, I'm first-time home buyer, that's great. Well, what if there's an issue with getting an FHA, right? Could we do a conventional, right? And this is also part of the lender conversation as well, because there are conventional loans that you can get at 3%, at 10%. It just really depends. So what are some backup options that client may have? And make sure, let's not wait until like a bomb drops and then you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do, right? So as a best practice, you want to try to start thinking ahead of time and being very proactive about that because it happens a lot and even it could just, this backup financing could just be another lender, right? It doesn't even have to be another product. It could just be another lender that you need to connect that buyer with because maybe the products that particular lender has doesn't meet the criteria that the buyer needs and is looking for. Inspection challenges. Major repair requests are definitely can definitely be a doozy, just really depending what it is and who's fixing those repairs, right? A lot of times I've seen agents say, I want the seller to fix the foundation and it's 15, $1,000, and there's nothing wrong with that. The seller is willing to do it. The question is, does the buyer want the seller to do it, right? Ultimately, depending on the type of loan, they may have to, but it just really depends. And that can be obviously a challenge. Safety concerns, anytime, you have a buyer who's doing an FHA loan, first thing they're going to be looking at, whether it's your inspection report or it's the appraisal, they're going to be looking at safety first. So any broken glass, any missing handrails on stairs, things of that nature. They're going to be looking at all of those things. Those are going to be concerns. You're not going to be able to close with those things. So just be mindful of that when you're out looking and showing homes. And you may want to flag those things if you know that your client's FHA and you're bringing them to a home and you see broken windows and safety issues. That may not be the home potentially that they may want to look at. There are, of course, other products that they can look at. They can talk to the lender about, such as the 203K and others. But just things to think about as well. Delayed inspections. One of the, I would say one of the key issues that come up during due diligence, right? So, you have, let's say, 5 days due diligence, but the inspection doesn't happen until day 3 or 4. That's an issue because it leaves you only a small window of time to really do negotiations on those repairs. And then, of course, buyer anxiety after reports. We kind of discussed this briefly a little bit. Just making sure, during your buyer presentations that you're letting them know if they, especially if they are a first-time home buyer, they never purchased a home. You want to go through that process with them and kind of ease some of their fears and anxiety around that because, some of these inspection reports are 100 pages long and have a lot of items in them, of course. Sometimes there's 40 items, but of course, we're only focused on really the major ones and safety ones that are concerning, but you want to make sure you have that conversation with your client in advance. Some solutions to kind of address that. Negotiate repairs in a timely manner, as I was saying before. I'm going to be honest with you, I've seen it a lot. Guys, get off this hamster wheel of trying to negotiate on the last day of due diligence. Don't do it to yourself. It is probably one of the worst things that you can do because the seller's not getting back to the listing agent. Now it's 7 o'clock at night, and you're trying to still negotiate an amendment to address concerns. I'll be honest with you, I will not do that anymore. I do not do that anymore. If we haven't agreed the day before due diligence or the morning of, we're terminating. That's just really where I'm standing on that. I think you guys should definitely protect your buyers, especially if you're in the evening of due diligence and you're negotiating. You're better off terminating, protecting your client's earnest money, and then finish negotiating the following day. And then you can always reinstate your contract if you terminate. It only takes one party to terminate a contract, but you can always reinstate that contract with a one-page GAR form called reinstate contract. So it is super easy to reinstate a contract, and it is super easy to terminate one and protect your client's earnest money. Um, if you walk into a house, it's a fixer-upper or it needs a lot of work, get some contractor quotes in advance. Why wait for the home inspection if you know that the home needs, repair, right? So just try to stay as proactive as possible and do things as much in advance as possible. Appraisal issues that come up as well. The property appraises below the contract price. We talked about that before, right? What does that negotiation look like? Is the seller willing to reduce that price? Market value, and let me just jump back for a second. Depending on what loan exhibit you're using, be careful. Make sure that you're reading that appraisal section so that you know how much time you and your client have to, one, notify the seller of the low appraisal, and then two, how much time they have to get back to you before the buyer can terminate and get their earnest money back, right? So just make sure you guys are reviewing those sections before you jump in and start negotiating as well. But also understand that, it is timely as well. So make sure that you're jumping on that in real time. Market value disputes, of course. You can also, I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but you can, if there is an appraisal dispute on comps, you can pull comps and send comps to the appraiser in a rebuttal. Doesn't mean they will accept it, but it is something you can definitely do and say, hey, I don't think the comps you pulled were truly comparable. I pulled some additional comps. Can you please take this into consideration, right? I've seen a few times where the appraiser has adjusted the appraisal based on that. So it just really depends on the company and the appraiser as well. And then, of course, the seller unwilling to reduce the price. We just kind of discussed that. Just make sure that the buyer understands if they don't reduce, they're going to have to cover that differential if they still want to move forward with that contract. And then some solutions, as I said, challenge the appraisal. You can send comps in of your own, renegotiate the terms, right? So if the seller's, unwilling to reduce the price, the sales price, then then maybe increase the buyer credit from the seller, right? But if the buyer, of course, wants to move forward without the reduction or any other credit, then you can increase the buyer cash contribution as well. And guys, jump into the chat if you guys do have any questions, or feel free to stop me. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions at any time as well. Title and legal obstacles, liens on property. Liens on property, of course. So one thing I guess I'll say on the listing side, guys, Pull the deeds, guys. Pull the deeds on when you do get a listing, so that you can see what's on the deed, who's on the deed, right? Because ultimately you say, "Oh, my wife's not on the deed, but it's just me. I bought the house," right? But then your seller forgot that he put his daughter on the deed, right? And so you're 2 weeks away from closing, title comes back and says, "Oh, there's someone else on the deed." That's not on the contract, right? So try to jump ahead, try to get ahead of those issues, by pulling the deed in advance. You can pull the deed through gsccca.org, through the Secretary of State website. You can pull that and just take a look at that and see who's on the deed, right, in advance. Even though title will do their job, attorney and title will do their job, but we still have our job to do as well in our due diligence. Probate delays, of course, probating is an animal in itself. Usually takes 6 months to a year. So just make sure that whatever time frame you're looking at, just make sure that bank in those delays, because I'm saying 6 months to a year because we thought it would take 6 months, but it's now a year and we're almost there, right? So just make sure you're calculating those delays in there as well. Boundary disputes. Guys, you have clients that are buying land, even property, resale property. I always recommend to my clients, my buyers, that if there's not a survey on gsccca.org, if there's not a survey on any of the other public websites available, whether it's through the building department or Q Public or whatever, I always recommend to my buyers that they should get a survey done. I'll be honest with you, most will say, I'm not paying for a survey. But ultimately, the last thing that you want your client to wind up is buying a home and then having boundary disputes with the neighbor. So I always recommend it. It usually, if there's, and it's not even a survey, if you even just marking, um, uh, staking the markers, they call it. It's not doing a survey, but they're just at least staking the corners of the property, at least so that you have an idea of, okay, is there a driveway on my property line, right? So, and then that's a smaller fee for that than versus a full survey, but I do highly recommend that you promote that to your clients, and they get that done either prior to closing or at closing, or after. HOA violations and or special assessments. Those obviously can be issues. A lot of times we get that through the community association disclosure. But the seller sometimes does not disclose what they don't know or what they may not be aware of, what they forgot about. I had an issue where there was a special assessment that came up. It wasn't on the CAD, but it came up after. The special assessment was pretty hefty. It was at Lake Dow, actually. I think it was a $30,000 assessment, had to do with the work they were doing with the lake, but that is a pretty significant number, $30,000 that has to be paid, um, that the buyer is not aware of, right? And this has to be paid. And the seller wasn't aware of it either because for whatever reason, it took place a few years ago, and there wasn't, I guess, recent paperwork sent out on that. So just be aware of those things, some solutions you can do to kind of, get over these obstacles. Work closely and early with your attorneys. Make sure you have your attorney that you partner with, right? You know them, you can call them, you can ask them questions. They'll get back to you, right? Including the title company as well. I highly recommend that you get the seller property disclosure and the community association disclosure during due diligence, or at least before it ends, so that there's no surprises to the buyer. And that will hopefully help address a lot of these issues that we just discussed. And then just communication breakdowns. I talked about it before. Guys, answer your phones, answer your texts, right? Delayed responses, misunderstandings, lack of updates, emotional conflict. So, guys, friend the other agent. I'll be honest with you. I don't always love the other agent on the other side of my deal, just to be honest with you. Sometimes they don't answer the phone. Sometimes they don't text me back in a timely manner, but I try to friend them as best as possible because that's the only way you guys are going to really, truly make it to that table, right? Making sure that you have built that partnership, that relationship with that other agent so that you guys can communicate whatever issues, concerns the buyer has, the seller has in a timely manner in real time, and hopefully you can get them addressed as well. So just consistent communication, clear expectations, and keep everyone informed. One best practice I like to do anytime I'm sending an email about anything on my contract, I try to include everybody. So it's the listing agent. If I'm the buyer agent, I'm including the lender, I'm including the attorney, I'm including everybody. Even if it's something that hasn't been done yet, oh, we're about to extend the closing date. We're going to extend it to blank. Once we confirm what we're extending it to, I'm looping everyone in because we're going to work on that amendment. But I also don't want the attorney, we're 3 days out from closing and the attorney's wondering, are we closing on Friday at 12 o'clock, right? And they can fill that slot with someone else, and we're not going to close for 2 more weeks. So I just try to, clear communication, loop all parties in. It's what's going to really help you get to the closing table. Buyer and seller emotions, fear of commitment. On buy side, again, that's just part of your buyer presentation. Also listing presentation. Some sellers get cold feet, and say, I don't want to sell my house. It definitely happens. It's happened a few times. Unrealistic expectations, right? And, part of your presentation is really making sure that, your clients understand your expectations, but also that you understand their expectations and where you guys are going to meet, right? Stress during negotiations, there really shouldn't be, but I know there always is, right? Because, a tax, amendment to address concerns, we're always going back and forth, or maybe there's another amendment. Maybe the appraisal got done and there's some lender required repairs that has to get done. And, so there's continual negotiations throughout the contract process. But again, if you prep your client in advance, they will be stress free during this process. The only person that will be stressing during this process is probably you, right? Because you're negotiating on their behalf. And some solutions to really address some of these things, educate your clients early on, like I said in the client presentations, provide them with reassurances, and focus on your client's goals. At the end of the day, that's what really matters, is what is your client's goal, right? And so negotiation obstacles, low offers, counter offer disputes, closing cost disagreements, and also contingency conflicts. So, just some solutions for those, stay calm, present any market data that you have, or any prior data that you can provide to support whatever that obstacle is on negotiation. And ultimately, a great way to really look at every and all negotiations is creating a win-win solution. Ultimately, you're looking out for the best interest of your client, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're able to move forward in a successful negotiation. So creating a win-win solution definitely goes a long way. Time management and deadlines, missed contingency dates, delayed paperwork, closing scheduling conflicts. Just some solutions I'll say to that. Transaction checklists, we do have them in paperless pipeline. I can't speak for every single maximum one, but for our maximum, we do have checklists, contracts to close checklists, listing checklists, and so on and so forth. Guys, use them. They are for your advantage. They're to your advantage to use. Use calendar reminders. And if all has failed, guys, I'm going to say hire a transaction coordinator. And if you want to go a step further, hire a real estate assistant, right? Because ultimately, the last thing you want to do is miss any contingency dates. And I know it's happened to a lot of agents. Delayed paperwork, right? Oh, I'm busy. I'm on vacation. I'm on a cruise. I'm going to Cancun. I won't have my laptop, right? And so all of these things, of course, they all happen. It's like the perfect storm when you're getting ready for vacation. All else fails, right? And your deal goes sideways. So, hire a transaction coordinator or a real estate assistant, like I said, or just have your calendar reminders. Just be OCD with them and your transaction checklist, and that'll keep you on your time management and keep you on schedule with your deadlines. Technology documentation issues, missing signatures, incomplete disclosures, e-signature delays, system errors. I'm going to say some solutions to that is just double check all your document guys before you send them out. I like to triple check them. I know somebody's like, Trip, why do you check it 3, 4 times? Sometimes I check it 5 times because I know that I make mistakes, but I also know that I'm not perfect, right? So I check my docs more than 2 times before I send them out. So I highly recommend you guys at least check your docs twice. Use, of course, a reliable transaction management system. And I also recommend, guys, if you are on the buy side, I highly, highly recommend when you're sending your signing package, send the entire package so there is no chasing documents after, right? The only documents you'll be chasing after is any amendments, right? And you're not really chasing those, you're creating those. But the only thing that you're really waiting for might be a lead-based paint disclosure that the seller didn't provide, or a seller property disclosure, or a CAD, community association disclosure that they didn't provide. But, everything else, including, whether it's the F511 if you're using the attorney to hold the earnest money, or instructions to closing attorney, every and any single document that I need to get to the closing table, I include in my offer package. So that the only thing I have to worry about paperwork wise is amendments and having my client sign anything the seller sent over, like a lead-based paint form. And I'm pretty much done. So that is a great best practice for you guys. I highly recommend. Same thing when you're doing your brokerage agreements. The affiliated business disclosure, wire fraud, whatever other documents you need. One package, guys, one package, and knock it out the park in one package. I see a lot of agents chasing affiliated business disclosures, chasing wire frauds, chasing, all these documents for no, I don't see why. You have a brokerage agreement signed. Get it all done in one package. It'll make your life so much easier. I just wanted to kind of quickly cover the purchase and sale, just to kind of bring home kind of all of the items that I kind of discussed. So just on the first page of the purchase and sale, just make sure that that's thoroughly completed. Make sure you have the address, the county, the zip, the MLS number, your tax parcel ID number. Make sure you have your legal description because we all know that the address is not a legal description, right? So make sure that you have that legal description box checked. I would say number three is usually the easiest, which is the deed book and page, but it's totally up to you guys. You could even use the deed, right, as a legal description as well if you're pulling that, if you're on the listing side. Purchase price, right? Is there any seller concessions? The closing date, right? And that closing date, guys, the question is there temporary occupancy, right? Or are we closing and the keys are being handed over upon closing, right? So make sure those boxes are checked. You want to put in the closing attorney. You want to make sure you put who's holding the earnest money. Same thing with the earnest money, A, B, C, or D, right? You'll check those boxes. And of course, number eight, the most notorious, our due diligence period. Guys, just make sure you're banking in enough time for your clients to be able to get that inspection done and get your negotiations done. If you know the house needs repairs, I would highly recommend you give yourself more than 7 days. I know a lot of agents like 5 days and 7 days. If you know it needs repairs, give yourself 10 days, right? So that you can have more time to negotiate, more time to get contractor quotes. Identify if it, lead-based paint, and then of course representation. If you're on the buy side or you represent your customer, you represent your buyer as a client or a customer, right? And then same thing on the list side as well. And then for the bottom of the page, making sure that you're highlighting if there's any material relationships, you want to make sure that you identify that there. If there's not, just put NA there, right? That's a license law requirement. What I will say is I went to a training with Greg in December of 2025. There was an attorney that spoke, and he said for material relationship, he said basically you need to disclose if you have a relationship with someone in the transaction and it will affect your client, right? But ultimately, I will be honest with you, for myself, I'm going to disclose any material relationship, right? Because it's from a liability perspective, I think it's in my best interest to just say, hey, if I know the listing agent, if I know the buy, if I know the buyer agent, if I know the buyer, if I know the seller, whatever it is, I'm just disclosing. There's no harm, no foul, right? And then I would say probably one of the most important pieces on page one, number 11. I see a lot of agents sending out offers with no time limit on it, no time limit of the offer. Please, guys, if, you can send out an offer, someone can sign it 6 months from now. It will be valid if you don't put a time frame on this on your offer. So make sure that you're putting time limits on your offers. As for myself as a best practice, what I do is usually 24 to 48 hours. I don't think a seller needs more time than that to let me know if they're interested in my buyer's offer. I just want to jump to the loan exhibit from what we were discussing earlier. Thank you, sir. The loan exhibit, just make sure that you're speaking with that lender. I know a lot of agents are like, oh, I'm just going to put 6.5 there because right now rates are at 6%, right? Or whatever it is. Don't do that, guys. I'm going to be honest with you that you're not operating in the best interest of your client. Please get that number, that percentage that can be no greater than. Please make sure you're getting that from your loan officer or the lender that you're working with. And then all of the other criteria as well. How much money are they putting down? What's the term? Is it a fixed loan? Is it adjustable rate loan? Right? Is it their first mortgage? Are they buying a second home? Right? So just make sure. And I just pulled this from FHA just as an FYI, just for you guys, just for reference, just to kind of go over that. I think that's really important. Also, another thing I want to flag on that, a lot of agents put TBD or they put market in that section. I'm going to say, guys, I'm going to be honest with you, that is an unfair trade practice and that's against licensed law. And not only that, you're setting your client up to lose their earnest money. And what I mean by that is if the deal goes sideways, let's say your client gets denied the loan because they can't afford the monthly payment, right? Because of the interest rate, and you put market or you put TBD, your client, even though their loan got denied, they're going to lose their earnest money because you did not put a percentage in there, right? So even though they got denied because of the interest rate, you didn't set a no greater than to give them that threshold, which you get from the lender, because only the lender can give you that. Like, they'll tell you your buyer cannot get, an interest rate no greater than 6.25. Otherwise, their DTI is out of whack, right? So just make sure, guys, that you're getting that number from the lender. You're putting that in there because interest rates change by the day. We do not know what the interest rate's going to be tomorrow. So just make sure you're protecting your clients. Also, length of financing contingency period, and also approved lender section. So if you put a lender in this approved section, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's not a bad thing. But if you do put a lender in the approved section, your buyer does need to apply for a loan or mortgage through that lender initially. They may not, they don't need to close with that lender, but they need to apply for a mortgage with that lender. What I like to do, just to be honest, guys, I leave it blank because I don't know what lender ultimately my client's going to go with. And I don't want to kind of pigeonhole my client with one lender. Even though I know they've been working with this lender, they worked with them 3 times. I still do not do it. I leave it blank because it gives them the most flexibility, right, to move around lenders. We don't have to, do amendments because I'm changing it from Rocket Mortgage to, now Wildfire Mortgage. I don't have to do any of that, right? And then, number three, the length of the finance contingency period. Guys, I know a lot of us, and I've been guilty too. I will definitely say I've been guilty too. I will throw like 21 in there, and I'm like, that's it, done, right? But the issue with that is that not all lenders are made equal, right? Just like not all realtors and real estate agents are made equal. So you just want to make sure that you're getting that number from the lender because 21 may be a general rule, so to speak, of a date, but that particular lender may need 25 days. I actually had that happen to me last month with a lender who needed not 21, they asked for 30. So every lender is different. I think that was Delta Community Credit Union. So every bank, every lender, they're all different. You got to get that number from them. And then just to kind of bring us to the end of the purchase and sale on special stipulations, guys, just make sure that you're using any and all GAR special stipulations whenever necessary, whenever possible. I just flagged a few that, generally, I'm not saying you have to use these, but you have the septic clearance letter. If the property has a septic system, you have your termite letter, special stipulations in there, business days. Special stip, you have SS 620, our most famous one, which is for, actually for buyer compensation. So guys, just make sure that you're going through those special stipulations and you're pulling what you need for your clients as best as possible. For you guys who don't use them often, the GAR special stipulations are in your transaction desk, in your form section. It's a folder in your form section. And then also, Maximum One does have, broker special stipulations. I can't speak for every Maximum One, but here with Ming and Allen, we actually have in Paperless Pipeline, we have some special stipulation docs of special stips that they've written that are for agent use as well. So just go into the reference section of Paperless Pipeline, and you'll be able to pull some additional special stipulations that's approved by the broker for your use as well. I will just say any written as a best practice, any written special stipulations, should be reviewed and approved by your broker. So if you're like, I'm going to write this special stipulation, that is totally fine. Go for it, right? But you do want to have your broker review that just to make sure that you're fully protected. And I'm sharing a best practice with you guys of what I do, not just for special stipulations, but also for amendments as well, right? And that is the who, the what, the when, the how, and then what if, right? So, the seller, right, is gonna put a new roof on the house, right, in 2 weeks with XYZ roofing, right? It's gonna cost $15,000. The seller is paying for that, right? And then what if that doesn't happen? Right? So you'll write that special stipulation out, but then what if that doesn't happen? What's the buyer out, right? Like what's the repercussions, right? What's the next step if that doesn't happen? So when you're writing your special steps, just I think this is a golden rule, at least for me. Who, what, when, how, and then what if it doesn't happen? What are you going to do now, right? What is that special stipulation going to say? What is that amendment gonna, what is that out? What does that out look like for the buyer? And then top skills to overcome some of these obstacles, strong communication, like we discussed, that just really communicating with the lender, the attorney, the other agent, your client, right? Also your broker. Maybe you need to pitch it and talk to your broker. Some of you guys call me, and that's totally fine too, right? Call compliance, right? No problem, right? But just communicate, guys. That's the way that you're really going to get things done. Negotiation expertise. There's lots of CE classes that we have around negotiations. There's also NAR designations as well available. If you think you want to become a master negotiator and really build up your expertise in that arena. Problem solving. Again, you could be doing that with other agents. You could be doing that with your broker. You could be calling compliance. Just talk to other people to get different perspectives. It kind of opens up your options. Market knowledge. If you're not pulling reports, right, every month or every other week, make sure that you're coming to our sales meeting or the sales meetings for your brokerages so that you can find out what's happening in the market. What is the medium sales price, right? How, are we up or down on new listings for the month? Year over year, what does that look like? What's happening in the market, right? What does interest rates look like? So just make sure that you're either pulling that data for yourself or you're going to some sort of meeting like our sales meeting or brainstorming monthly that's covering that market knowledge to keep you as that industry expert. Relationship building, I kind of, honed on that a few times already. I threw out your client, your broker, the other agent, right? The lender, like everybody. You're building relationships with everyone, right? And that's how you're going to overcome these obstacles. And attention to detail. As I said, double check everything that you do. I've seen agents put the wrong sales price on contracts. I've seen agents extend the close date in a different year, right? Listen, no one's perfect. I'm not perfect either, but just make sure that you're looking over your work multiple times and take your time while you're doing it. That will definitely set you up for success and minimize any mistakes that you have. If you have a mentor as well or a coach, have them review your stuff as well and give you feedback, right? Closing more deals successfully. That's how you're going to do it, right? You're going to prepare your clients early. We talked about, your client presentations and how you're going to prepare them for all of these potential obstacles that we know are going to come up, right? Like there isn't a house out there, including new construction, that doesn't get an inspection with repairs if you guys are with me, right? So you should be preparing them for this. This is standard stuff that's gonna happen. We know it's gonna happen, right? We're being proactive in our approach. You're gonna anticipate all those obstacles because it's normal. Those things happen, right? It's part of the process. You're gonna build strong vendor relationships, right? So that you can, maybe you have a contractor or a home inspector or whatever it is that your client needs. Make sure you're building those strong relationships, even on the list side, whether it's a landscaping company or a staging company, whatever it is, or a roofing company, just make sure you have those relationships so when your client have those needs, you have, great resources for them. Stay as organized as possible, guys. Whether it's creating templates in transaction desk or having folders on your computer separated, having a whiteboard in your house and documenting, or in your home office and documenting all of your transactions and where you are. Just stay as organized as possible. That's going to help you get ahead and stay ahead of and closing more deals successfully. Remain solution focused and always remain proactive. As I've been saying, just think of things that's gonna happen, right? And when things do happen, we kind of rip our hair out, but ultimately our next step is really just what's the solution, right? How do we fix this? So if you can approach every issue with how can we fix this or how can I fix this, you will probably close more deals successfully. So, with that being said, I would like to open it up, and I'd love to kind of hear from some of you guys on some past experiences of obstacles that you faced in prior transactions, and if you could share with us how you successfully overcame them and made it to that closing table. I actually had someone come in yesterday, and she was telling me how she had to go to a state prison to have a quick claim deed signed by an inmate in order to close. So I know you guys have some stories for me. I do have a question. I see someone asked, where do you disclose material relationship on a buyer brokerage agreement? You typically wouldn't disclose in a buyer brokerage agreement because the buyer brokerage agreement is a relationship between you and your client. But if you're related to that client, I would put that in the special stipulation section on the second to last page, which I believe is page 7 at the bottom. So maybe it's your mother you're representing, maybe it's your father or your cousin or your uncle. You can definitely disclose that in your special stipulation section. But the only people that are going to review that is really you, your client, and your broker. So I hope that answers your question, Lakeisha.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Um, if you know a person, I guess, been friends with a person forever or whatever, and you really know them as a friend, are you allowed to put that also in the contract, in the
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can put that. So what I showed on material relationship was the first page of the purchase and sale. So
uh-huh.
there's no criteria. Because actually I had discussion with with the attorney in that training I was at. There's no criteria as far as the actual relationship that you need to disclose it. Like, okay, you know them for at least 5 years, right? But it's really up to you, like what makes you feel comfortable. Like if you said you knew them for a long time, then yeah, I would just disclose it. Like I said, it's no harm, no foul. Ultimately, the way the attorney explained it is, you want to disclose any relationship that may affect your client. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I'm on the buy side, I represent the buyer, but I know the listing agent. Like we go out, we have drinks, you know what I mean? Like I know the listing agent. We hang out. I might have been to a barbecue with them. So I actually know them. So that could affect my client because when we go to negotiations, maybe I won't be as tough, right? And I'm not saying I won't be, but I'm saying from my buyer's perspective, right? So I should disclose that with my client so that my client knows that I do know them, so that there is no improprieties or any potential issues after the fact. Like, oh, he didn't, go to bat for me on getting that sales price dropped because they were friends, right? So
Mhm.
it's really from that liability perspective. But anybody that I know, like at all, and we're in a transaction, I'm just going to disclose it. Whether it's going to affect my client potentially negatively or not, just because I'm a CYA guy, I like to cover my assets. So I just like to make sure and it's no harm, no foul, right? It doesn't hurt you, it doesn't hurt anybody. You're just saying, hey, I know the listing agent, and that's it. So hopefully
Okay,
that answers your question.
thank you. That's good to know.
You're welcome. And then I have
I,
another question. Oh, God, sorry.
I have something that I'd like a clarification. I'm
Sure.
working on a deal and we're due to close Friday. But we had an amendment. The buyer's agent sent over amendment and we did not agree with that amendment. So I sent over an amendment number 2. She marks out the amendment number 2. Once we agreed, because we all agreed on amendment number 2, she
Okay.
marked it out and put amendment number one. And I said, you cannot do that. I need a paper trail. And she says, no, we never got that amendment. Amendment number one, we never agreed upon. And we did agree upon amendment number two. So it becomes amendment number one.
So, so to so to answer your question, hopefully I think I can answer it. If she sent you amendment number one, Roger, can you do I open the door? If she sent you a amendment, she sent you amendment number one, and then you sent back amendment number two. Is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure
Right,
you understand.
right,
But
right.
amendment number one was never fully executed, correct?
No, right,
So
right.
then, even though you did put a number two on that other amendment, technically it's still number one because
Okay.
you're negotiating. You're
Oh, okay.
negotiating that amendment, so it's still always going to stay number one until it's fully executed by all parties, and then
Mm-hmm.
the next one's going to be number two.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just wanted some clarification on that.
And
Because we
congratulations,
did, yeah, we,
congratulations on your closing.
oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I have another question from Veronica. She said, what are some examples of outs to include in special steps for repairs in case it doesn't happen? So, I mean, that's kind of a loaded. This could be a lot of outs to answer your question, but I'll try to be more specific. One would be the buyer having the right to terminate and get their earnest money back in full, plus any other fees like inspection fee, appraisal fee. You can write something like that. That would be something I'd put in there. Um, Another out could be a city. It just really depends like what process you're in. Because actually, we just had something happen on Friday where they actually got to the closing table. They did the walkthrough and the repairs didn't happen. So it can ha that what you're saying, the outs could happen in a variety of different ways where like they said it was done and it wasn't, and now we're at closing table and now you're negotiating either money going into escrow to hire a contractor to fix those repairs, or the seller's giving the buyer a credit for the repairs that they didn't complete. So it's going to vary, but ultimately, if you're doing repairs and you're concerned about them not getting done, you could also say that if the repairs are not, done by a specific date, then the seller will be providing the buyer with a $5,000 credit towards, at closing or something like there's just so many different ways of doing those outs. But again, if you go back to the who, what, when, and how, and then the what if it doesn't happen, that's where you're going to throw in that language to protect your client. So if these things don't happen, my client gets to walk away and they get their earnest money back and they get their inspection money back and they get their appraisal money back from the seller. So I hope that answers your question. You're welcome. All right, awesome. So thank you guys. You guys have some great questions, but I didn't hear any stories. I know you guys have some stories for me, some crazy obstacles that you had to overcome. And I see some of you guys. I got Carla. I know you got some stories for me, Carla. Michelle, David, I know you have some. So I'd love to hear one or two, guys.
I'll share a recent story.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Christian Smoke, and I was under contract for one of my listings. And the only reason we accepted their offer was because they made an offer, above asking offer.
Okay.
Great terms, 30-day close. Actually, I think it was like less than 30 days. Anyway, we get to maybe about, well, a day before, the last day of the end of the financing contingency. And the agent calls and says, hey, the lender doesn't have the income documents for the buyer. And I'm like, what? You tell us this now? But what threw me off is me and the agent had been conversing like all the time. And so she never,
Ah,
she
good
never
job.
mentioned it. So I was just really, it really was very frustrating. And so she sends an email at 11:59, like 11:30 at night on a Friday night when we're asleep. And she says, um, just want to let everybody know that we have to have a price reduction of $5,000 or the buyer's going to walk away or we can terminate. And I'm
Wow.
just like, wow, like it really doesn't matter. Sometimes, well, my goal is always to be a friendly agent. Like just get the deal done, be as friendly as possible.
Yep.
But even that is not, I don't know. I just, when I came into this industry, veterans will always say, I don't understand why agents have to be so nasty to each other, blah, 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 blah. And I always remembered that. Like, hey, just always stay cordial. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. We can close a deal in good faith, you know.
Definitely.
But, you know, even with that, I find that people can really just be like as an agent, just saying things and then and do things like that. So it was upsetting, but we ended up, well, they sent the unilateral. We so they got their earnest money back or whatever. We got back under contract immediately, but I just that experience was just really kind of I had never had anything happen like that,
Wow.
and we thought it was a sure thing. So that was
Yeah.
kind of that wild
Yeah, I'm
experience.
sorry to hear that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And you still made it to the table, but of course with a different vibe.
Not yet,
But
no,
but what
not
I
yet, not
yeah.
yet.
Oh,
But
no, not yet. Oh, okay, okay. Well,
well, we
you'll get
supposed to
there.
this
You'll get
week,
there. Okay,
this
well,
week.
I'm
So
knocking
I
on
don't
wood
like to
for
talk
you.
about deals until they're closed.
I know, I know. So I always say that. I'm like, until the lady sings, it's not like it didn't happen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But also I will say this too. I think like that was definitely a great learning opportunity too, in the sense of like, when you do have a contract and you're on the list side and everything looks good on paper, as the listing agent, make sure you call that lender.
I did.
Oh,
Me
you
and the
did, and they
that's
didn't
what
say
I'm
anything?
saying.
Oh,
I
the
have
lender
been
didn't tell you?
emailing the lender, calling the lender, and the lender
Oh,
kept
I
saying,
gotcha.
"Oh, I've been doing this for 50 years. I know what I'm doing."
Gotcha.
And I'm like, "Okay, well, now look what happened."
I will be honest with you. As I said, not all lenders are made equal, so that's an unfortunate situation. But I will say there are a lot of agents that say that same line as well.
Yeah,
Right? And they may not also know what they're doing as well. But I think you definitely are hitting the nail with the head with being cordial, building that relationship because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to make it to the table, right? And the only way to do that is by making sure everyone's on the same page. So
yeah.
I think you should stay that path. I think, a lot of my thinking on why some agents, I should say, are combative with others. I think that they look at it as it's a competition thing, and we're
But
salespeople, and
it's not. We have the
I
same
will.
goal.
But this is what from my perspective, and again, just sharing this with everyone here. Only 10% of all agents do 90% of the transactions.
Mm,
So what that means is one out of every 10 agents, for the most part, is
wow.
actually productive. So to me, I'll be honest with you, no matter how many agents are around me or that I know or whatever, none of you guys are a threat to me. And it's not because I'm so good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying not a threat because most agents don't even produce. And that's not a dib to anybody. I'm just saying in general terms, that's just statistics. That's what the numbers are showing. Only 10% of agents do 90% of the work of the transactions.
I
So
had
Good
Now I had a
statistic.
situation I'd like to share with you all. I had a situation where
sure.
I was dealing with the selling agent, and she was the broker. And just because I questioned her, she's like, "Oh, well, I'm a broker, and I know." Basically, I know more than you. But to make a long story short, at the closing, when I was getting ready to go to the closing, her lender calls me and says, "I need your seller to bring $3,000 to closing." And I said, "What are you talking about? My seller's not bringing any money to closing. She's getting money."
Yeah.
But what had happened, we had given them about $10,000, and they couldn't use it all. And I said, "Well, did you
Mm,
get a home warranty?" And the lender got involved, and they wanted us to write a check. I was like, "This is illegal. If it's not on the HUD, you're not getting any money." The
yeah.
attorney told them that. And even after we closed, she called my broker and she emailed me and said, "I need that $3,000. You guys promised it." And she went on and on and on. And she was
Wow.
so nasty throughout the whole ordeal. When we got on the contract, she became very nasty.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, and that's unfortunate. But I will say that to me, the way I'm looking, the way I hear what you're saying and the story, that was a fault of the buyer agent
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately, and again, this goes back to talking to your lender and making sure you know what you're doing, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
whether you're getting a FHA loan or a conventional loan or a VA loan, they all have different concession limits.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know those limits, you need to talk to your lender so that you do know those limits so you're not asking for more money than the client can actually get. And
That's true.
that sounds like what that kind of transpired in that deal.
And yeah,
And then they
I
tried to
just
force you to force the seller to give them that extra money that they couldn't get because it's not legal through the lender, right? Um,
right,
yeah.
right. I just called a lender on a situation because the buyers were asking for 13,000. I said, we're not giving you $13,000 for closing. That's too excessive. So I
Wow.
just called their lender and she said, oh no, 9,000 or 8,000 would do it. And
Sure.
that's what we did.
Gotcha. Well, I will say this for you guys. I know we're talking on this side, but I'm gonna just say this for you guys on because I go on both sides, right? But for you guys who also work on the buy side as well, that 13,000 that you're talking about, that buyer agent may have had a different strategy because I actually use that strategy in the sense of asking for a large concession, not because they can get the money, all of it at closing, but my strategy is they need 9,000 for closing, so they got 4,000 extra, and that 4,000 extra, they actually can receive that, but not at closing. So what I want my lender to do with that 4,000 is buy down their interest rate, and
Oh
that
yeah.
can be
Hmm.
done.
Hmm.
That can be done. So that's another way on the buy side for you to kind of strategize, maybe getting more concessions than the actual lender limit because you're going to have your client buy down their interest rate to bring their mortgage payment down. So that's really a great strategy if on the buy side. So, and maybe that's what that agent was doing. But the fact that you were able to negotiate that down was great. So, and thank you so much for sharing as well.
Hey, Martin, this Carl. I need to say something if you don't mind, since you called me
Yeah.
out.
Yes, please.
Yes, just like recently I had a closing, and before I had a closing, I had to call Alan at when I was at the closing.
Yeah.
Please make sure you read your HUD statements. Don't take it for granted what the attorney gives to you or the lender, because I had a buyer they had a $30,000 concession because we wanted to make the repairs after closing. So we
Yeah.
bought the house and we got 30,000 reduction, but we wanted the money after closing because it took a lot to bring this house up.
Yeah.
So the agent on the other side thought we was getting commission on that money, and we were not getting paid commission. It was in my contract. And we had a 3 hour closing because the lender had to redo everything at
Wow.
the closing. I kept telling them, we're not getting paid on commission. So I had to call Alan and say, can you please help me? And finally, they understood what I was saying, and we did not get paid commission on that extra money, and that full amount went to the buyer as I had it addressed on the contract. So please read your HUD statements, itemize it, go down line for line, and make sure you understand everything that's on there, what the buyer's supposed to get, and what the seller's supposed to receive at closing. And it worked out for us, but we had to sit there for 3 hours.
And thank you, Carla, for sharing that because we just had an issue last week that it wasn't on the buyer or seller, but I'm flagging this because what you're saying is very valid. Guys, please review your HUDs. And I will say this, and I'm going to say it because we had an agent at closing. They reviewed the HUD. The compensation wasn't correct. They left the closing and didn't do anything or say anything. They said something to the attorney. The attorney was like, "Oh, well, I'm not sure, blah 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 blah, whatever." Left the closing over $2,000 short and came back to the brokerage, of course, with the HUD and everything. And Ming is like, "What is this? What's going on? What happened with the rest of your money?" Oh, the attorney said that the compensation was changed. It was like, what? The compensation wasn't changed. We have instructions to closing attorney. It was never changed after that. It was some real underhanded stuff, unfortunately. But Ming wound up calling the attorney. I had to call the attorney twice and send an email, and we just got that agent's money in Friday. We just got the money from the attorney. They sent the differential, but we had to fight with them over it for the agent's money. So guys, if the HUD is wrong, do not, and your check and your compensation is wrong, do not leave the closing like that. Because ultimately, once the closing is done, that's it. All funds have been, that's it. It is done. Like you can't go back and say, oh, I want my $3,000. I want my 2,000. You have to settle that at the closing table. So thank
Correct.
you so much, caller, for bringing that up as well. So, but with that being said, thank you guys so much for hanging with me today on overcoming obstacles. Um, to closing. And thank you guys for your questions. Thank you guys for jumping in and sharing your stories. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys to be able to get more deals to that closing table. I left my information for you guys, my email's there as well. If you guys ever have any questions after, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help if I can. But of course, you have your brokers as well. But with that said, having an awesome June, guys, and an awesome rest of the year as well. And thank you for joining today.